All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Hardwin Godricsson. I am from the Barony of Alberon in the Kingdom of the Outlands, and my pronouns are he/them. And today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite things in the entire known world, which is non-alcoholic period drinks, specifically Sekanjabin and Oxmel. We are going to go over Shabbat as well, just as more of like a mentioning, um, because it's sort of the same concept. So, for those of you who are not familiar, Sekanjabin is a vinegar syrup. It's usually made with, it can be made with any kind of vinegar. I usually use red wine vinegar for the sake of as close to period authenticity as possible. Um, and it's usually flavored with mint, and it's mixed with water in a ratio to create a drink that's got similar properties to modern Gatorade. If you'll excuse me for a moment. All right. So, then there's also Oxymel, which first appeared in Hippocrates, and it's mentioned as something that's medicinal and helpful to those suffering from rheumatic fevers. Now, both of these drinks uh, originated in at least the Sekanjabin. The first recipe that everyone is most familiar with comes from the 13th century cookbook known as the Anonymous Andalusian Cookbook. And that one talks about how it is beneficial for jaundice, for the fevers of jaundice, and calms it and cuts the thirst. It also is beneficial in phlegmatic fevers. Then oxymel was believed to be medicinal as well, and oxymel is basically the honey version, um, as opposed to sugar, and that is kind of a little bit more of a European. I don't want to say Indo-European, but a little bit more of a Western European, considering it was mostly seen in Greece. And then Shabbat, which is also known as sherbet to some of the other places, and the oldest mention of sherbets in a Persian book in the 12th century, and it's a medical encyclopedia, and it describes the varieties available in Iran. And Sekanjabin technically falls under the table, the family of sharbats. But for this class, um, I'm considering them different things. Now, so Sekanjabin is made, like I said, with vinegar and sugar, usually. And my recipe is, um, let's see, the recipe I use, which I will actually put into the chat here in just a moment, um, is a redaction from the book, from the Andalusian book, and it was made by Lady Murienne de Aloyer, which I'm probably not saying right, but French is not my forte. And that is what I usually use when I'm making Sekanjabin. Now, um, while for the classic version, I recommend using red wine vinegar. I have seen everything from balsamic vinegar to white vinegar to apple cider vinegar, plum vinegar. Basically, this can be adapted to whatever you like. Um, and I imagine that's it. I will tell you that any vinegar tastes better with the sugar. As far as honey is concerned, you want to stick to kind of more citrusy noted vinegars if you can. Hence, red wine, white wine, sometimes balsamic, but it's a little bit strong for the honey. So if you're going to use balsamic vinegar, I recommend that you do it with sugar as opposed to the honey. So for both of the recipes, I use 4 cups sugar or honey, 1 cup red wine vinegar, 2 cups of water. And for the classic Sekanjabin, which is usually the mint, I've used dried, fresh, or a quarter teaspoon of mint extract to your taste. Um, Now with Oxymel, you don't flavor it. You literally just you just make it with the sugar, with the honey. And Shabbat, I'm going to tell you that the easiest thing for Shabbat is that if you have a Middle Eastern market in your hometown or anywhere near you, you go ahead and buy the fruit syrups and then you just mix it as is. It's a little bit easier. And there's also an interesting way to make it with milk for more of like a, I want to say like a cream ish based. And you can get those even at Walmart sometimes, the fruit syrups. My favorite is pomegranate. And that has a little bit, it kind of helps with the taste a little bit. Um, so, well, so here's a couple, so I'll go over the method of how I make mine, of course. Um, Now, as far as the sugar is concerned, um, you can use the white refined sugar. If you're wanting to be period, I imagine you could use the sugar forms that are made from paste usually. If you can find someone who can do that for you, or you've learned how to do it. If you learn how to do it, let me know because I'm curious. And then you can also use sugar in the raw. Now, the problem with sugar in the raw is that it takes a lot more of it. It takes a lot longer to dissolve. And if it's the night before an event and you're trying to get this done, I don't recommend anything that's going to make the process a little bit longer. Um, so that's a great question. The question is, do you recommend serving Sekanjamin at room temperature? Do you serve it over ice or chill it before serving? I tend to keep, if I'm serving Sekanjamin, I usually add it to cold water. Um, I do. Ice is good, especially if you happen to make your vinegar mixture a little, you happen to add a little more vinegar than you planned. It kind of helps. Yeah, exactly. It kind of helps mellow out the flavor. Um, I also think I have not tried the chilled syrup yet because it stores pretty well at room temperature for me. So I haven't tried that yet. Uh, as far as Oxmel is concerned, I recommend you definitely serve that one with ice if you can, just because the honey breaks down differently after you simmer it than sugar does. And sometimes that can lead, I don't want to say spoilage, but it can kind of make things taste a little strange if it sits in your hot car before you bring it into the event. Whereas if you leave it in a cooler at the very least, then it doesn't taste as strange. And then, of course, you can use, you can just use chilled water. Um, so one of the other cool things about Sekanjabin is though is that it can be and sherbet is that it can be flavored with anything. I make 2 versions. One is the classic with mint. The other is a strawberries and ginger version, which is right. It adds a little bit to the ginger kind of in a strange way helps cut some of the acidity of the vinegar, and it makes the strawberries is just a nice subtle sweetness that you can kind of taste there on the back of your palate. Um, and you can do any kind of version. I am wanting to try lemon because I'm a big fan of lemonade, and so like I'm intrigued to see how the flavor with that works. I don't for Oxymel, I don't recommend anything but just the honey and water. Um and the vinegar, because again, honey is one of those subtle flavors that if you mix it with something, you lose kind of like the subtlety of the honey, I think. If you're going to do anything flavor wise with Oxymel, use like an orange blossom honey if you can find that. I know it's a little expensive, but if you're making this for largesse, or if if you are at a feast and you're wanting to impress people, go ahead and spend a little bit of money. I think you can even, if there's a Costco available in your area, I think you can even get a fairly decent sized jar of orange blossom honey for pretty cheap. And then, of course, local honeys, have different flavor complexes and different profiles. So definitely that's a great idea as well. Um, so one of the things I talk about is water. Now, I have, every time I've made it, I have used, to make the syrup, one, I've used tap water. And because you boil it, like, you kind of, if there's anything in there that you don't want, it's kind of gotten rid of in the boiling process. Some people have recommended on some of my of other blogs and research, I have found bottled drinking water to make the syrup, but just like, you don't have to get the distilled or anything like that, just a gallon. I think at Walmart they come with the green cap, which is just the regular drinking water. Just use that to make your syrup. And um, if you're making this at a camping event, definitely bringing your own water is advisable. And I have a cooler. It's not very big, but it's, decent size ish, where I can fit a gallon of water, a liter bottle of sparkling water, and 2 bottles of syrup. And that works pretty well. The only place I don't bring Sekanjabin right now is Australia, and that was because it was either not have space for me on the war wagon, or because I don't drive myself right now. But now that I have my own vehicle, that might change. Um, Now, mint, like I've mentioned, that's the classic flavor for Sekanjabin. Um, I've used dried mint, and what I did most recently was I got a coffee filter with dried mint, and I tied it up into a little sachet, like an herb, like for herbal tea, and then I just let that steep in the hot syrup, and it tasted great. Um, I've had trouble coming across fresh mint that cost a little more than I was willing to pay. That is the one. Herbs for me, like, dried is still good, you know. So, but if you were using, say, like clove or vanilla, I would recommend that you try to use the vanilla pods and the actual whole cloves, because of how fine the ground clove is. It's not gonna work very well. Um, on the same note of herbs, though, when we're talking about flavorings, um, basil is very good. But you want the dried sweet Thai basil if you can get that. And honestly, you can dry the herbs yourself if that's what ends up working, because then, in my experience, the syrup is a little more shelf stable if you use dried herbs as opposed to fresh. Um, I'm still experimenting though, so we'll see how that goes. And then again, for Shabbat, I just go to my local halal market and pick up a couple different flavors of syrup. Like I said, my favorite is the pomegranate. Um, some people have argued you could use the Torani syrups, but I think those are too sweet. Yeah. Um, I'm like, well, and that kind of defeats the purpose, because the Shabbat is supposed to have the Shabbat already has the vinegar in it, which is helpful. Um, and that one tastes better over seltzer water, in my opinion. Let's see here. So we talked about strawberries and ginger. Now, I definitely recommend, when you're making, now talk about a couple of troubleshooting problems, and hold on just a moment. Unfortunately, I don't have any made today, so I have just plain water at the moment. Um, One of the things that I recommend is, if you can't get everything you need, you basically need a medium to large saucepan. I recommend, I like nonstick, but that's because that's what I have. If you have stainless steel, I say go for it. However, certain metals can be reactive to vinegar and cause a strange taste. So I recommend experimenting with your cooking vessel. Um, a great idea is to go to the thrift store and kind of like pick out, you know, like you go to Goodwill and they have pots and pans for like 97 cents or something like that. Pick out a couple and try it out and see which one works the best. And whichever one works the best, that's what you use to make your syrups. Um, the same is the other thing I'll say is that the wooden spoon for stirring, it's the same idea. You don't want to have a metallic taste. Um, so a wooden spoon for stirring would be better. Again, because vinegar can be reactive to certain metals, you know, like I believe copper is one of them. Again, I have to do a little bit more research on that, but one of the first times I tried making it, I used a metallic spoon to stir, just like a regular, silverware spoon, and I could taste the I could taste the metallic in it. So I definitely recommend a wooden stirring spoon. Yes, they are porous, but they're definitely you can disinfect them. You just kind of you boil them like you would boil silicone things or stuff like that. Um, and if you're going to do something other than wood, I would recommend a silicone spoon or stirring implement as opposed to just a straight up plastic one because sometimes the plastic ones can melt. uh, yeah, and you don't want melted bits of plastic in your syrup. That would not be pleasant. So if the stirring implements that I recommend are either wooden or silicone. Now, as far as transporting your syrups go, the nice thing is that you can use recycled bottles. I haven't cleaned the label off of this one yet, but this is a stopper bottle from Sprouts. It had their orangeade in it, and I like it because it pops open. It stays pretty sealed. And once you clean off the layer, even with the writing on this, it still looks pretty. Period. It looks great, and they travel. These bottles are made to travel well because they're made of a thicker glass. So, like, if say for example, someone in your house is a brewer, any of their stopper bottles like this would be great. My favorite are the Trader Joe bottles from when they do their ginger brew in December. I usually stock up on a couple of those because they're a little shorter and stouter, which means they can hold a bit more volume. Um, and I've also used everything from screw top liquor bottles because I am a recycler to plastic soda bottles, but you have to make sure that your syrup is cooled before you do that. Otherwise, you run into the melted plastic problem again. Um, so let's see. Um, so we're going to talk about serving because one of my goals with this project is to be able to have period-esque non-alcoholic drinks available at feasts. I've often heard people complain that the only thing you can do at feasts is lemonade or tea if no one's drinking water or if no one's drinking alcohol. And I think that's silly because there's definitely ways that you can provide to all of your guests, especially what if someone can't drink alcohol because of medical reasons, sobriety reasons, but they still want to enjoy themselves and have a good time. And for me, even though I don't drink anymore, the fact that the syrup itself comes in a bottle, like, still makes me feel included in a weird way. But, that's just me. Now, for a 1 8-ounce serving, I'd say eyeball about 2 to 3 tablespoons of syrup and combine with ice water or seltzer water for a different experience. I like mixing it with seltzer water. It kind of reminds me. Exactly. Thank you, Aurelia. A lot of sites are dry, so having options for people. Um, And the nice thing about these syrups is you can make that, or if you're making your own, the nice thing about these syrups is that you can control what goes in them. And say you have someone who's allergic to mint, then you make a version that doesn't have mint and it still tastes just as good. Or you have them do the Oxmel, which is just the honey, vinegar, and water. Um, and if you run out of time to make your syrups, you just go, like I said, you just go to the halal market and stock up on a few flavors and, you know, and a few gallons of water and hope it works out. Um, so with the 1 ounce, of course, mix to your taste and you can kind of figure it out. Now, for a larger serving, where say you're hosting a salon, if you're a courtesan, or you are bringing something to like a queen's tea or something like that, um, mix 1 cup syrup to a gallon of water or 1 liter of seltzer. It's already pre-mixed. It's already done. All you have to do is just bring it to the party, and you're set. Um, One of the other things that I will mention is that uh, if you can put a label on the bottle, I'm still experimenting with how that works. But if you label a bottle that's like specifically for the mint Sekanjabin, then just keep making your mint Sekanjabin in that bottle, your strawberry one in that bottle, etc. And that can make things a little bit easier. Now, there's a couple of ideas that I have come up with for a feast setting. And the first is put 1 bottle of syrup to a table and have mixing spoons or stir sticks so guests can make the drink to their taste. And then, of course, you have the pitcher of water. And if you have people who are serving, they can just make sure that the water pitchers are still filled as you go along. You can also do it buffet style. However, with recent things, we'll see how feasts turn out after we're allowed to have them again, and we may have to adjust that. But for buffet style, it's about the same idea. You just have a variety of syrups a lot with water or next to where you have your drinking water, and people can just mix it up however they like. Um, let's see. The last thing I'm going to talk about is making sure not to overboil your syrups. It doesn't really affect the flavor, but it will affect the thickness because when you're boiling, you're taking out the water of something, and if you end up with a slightly thicker mixture, just kind of add more water. Um, Another way to keep, and that's just where the constant stirring comes in. Um, Although you don't have to constantly stir, if you keep an eye on things, it will not. It won't boil over, but kids, dogs, the telephone, the doorbell. There's a lot of factors that could come into. Uh, oh, okay. How many parts syrup do you use to water? For me, I like mine. It depends on the flavor. If it's a classic syrup, which is just the Sekanjabin with the mint, I tend to do half and half because to me that tastes the best. Um, when I'm doing Oxmel, I add more water. So I would say like 2 cups, 2/3 water to 1/3 syrup. So a 2-to-1 ratio. I'm still experimenting with the Sharbat syrups, but when I've had them at Middle Eastern restaurants, it kind of feels like it's more of uh, about the same ratio. But honestly, just mix it to your taste. If you like things a little more sour, less water. If you like still having the taste of the vinegar, but maybe you don't want to pucker your lips every time you take a sip, then add more water. Um, and again, it's all just down to personal tastes. The very first time I tried it, I didn't put enough I didn't put enough water in for me, and the person who had made the syrup had added a little bit more vinegar than other flavoring. So I was just like, "Whoa, that's really intense." And she was like, "Oh, here." and poured a bit more water into my cup, and then I stirred it and tasted it again. I was like, oh, okay. It's basically like lemonade, you know? Um, and let's see here. One of the other things I recommend if you're doing fruit, you can use frozen in a pinch. But just be careful because that they can get mushy while you're waiting for the water to come up to boil to add them. You always add whatever you're steeping the flavor in after it has come to a boil and the syrup has thickened. I don't recommend boiling anything you're flavoring your syrups with in the syrup itself. You steep it like a tea, basically. Yeah. And as far as like citrus is concerned, you can use the whole, you can use the rind and the fruit. Uh, I would still, if you're looking maybe for just more of a more subtle lemon flavor, I would just use the zest. Um, orange. I actually have some clementines that I'm going to be trying here in the next couple of weeks to see how it tastes. The only one that I wouldn't recommend using is like no, ooh, rose petals. That's excellent. And you can even, I've also seen people where you can just use dash of rose water if you can't get to the, if you can't use actual rose petals. Um, so, um, I've also heard a rumor about using steeping jasmine tea in the syrup. I don't know. It kind of feels like the tannins in the black tea would kind of, or the green, even the light amount of tannins that are in the green tea would kind of mess with the flavor profile. At least that's just my thought. But experiment, try it, see how it turns out. Um, Lavender would be good. And with that, instead of oh, that's right, the jasmine tea from China would probably be a little less have a less tannins in it and be a lighter flavor. That's an excellent point. Um, as far as lavender is concerned, like I would use a white wine vinegar instead of a red. You can also use just plain white vinegar. And like if I was going to do citrus like a lemon, I would use apple cider vinegar because the apple cider vinegar can kind of like compete, quote unquote, with the lemon flavor. It doesn't over, and neither ends up overpowering the other. The one experiment I did with balsamic, I used vanilla extract and that didn't work very well. That was the one extract that didn't work for me. So if I was going to do that again, I would go ahead and spend the money on the vanilla bean pods, which are a little more accessible than they used to be. So definitely, you know. Um, so let's see. There's also the idea of mixing the flavored extract to the sugar before you cook it. Like how you can make a flavored sugar. So if you used without maybe necessarily having to use the vanilla bean, if you made your own vanilla sugar, which where you take a split vanilla bean pod and you mix it in with the sugar and you let it sit and it becomes a vanilla sugar and then you cook it, that could work. I know someone who has tried a lavender sugar, which is how I know that you should use a lighter vinegar with that. Um, so I think that basically to sum up, that in the end, it literally just takes experimentation. But once you find a flavor combination that you like and a formula and recipe that you like and that you can work with, then Sekanjabin and sherbet and other syrups like that are really easy. They're really storageable. They're easy to store. They're customizable, and the serving options I think are really worth it. One thing that I will point out is that in certain parts of Iran, at least today, they will just dip lettuce leaves in the Sekanjabin syrup. Which I know I was like, I'm interested to try that because lettuce is a very neutral flavor. So I imagine it would like taste. I would imagine it would taste all right. But yeah, that's everything that I have for y'all. So, like I said, I was supposed to have a handout, and that didn't happen because real life. Um, so, does anyone have any questions or comments, ideas? I'm always looking for new ideas on how to do this kind of stuff.
I am wondering if this kind of a fruit syrup, like the wrap that I actually make for perfumery, but that, for example, like dates or
Mm-hmm.
pomegranate, if they will work for sure. But I mean, they're really pretty much thick. It's like a juice of fruits cooked
Mm-hmm.
into a very thick syrup. It's nearly like a paste.
Yeah. I would say that that would be a good idea. I wouldn't do I would cook the batch not all the way down to the paste. I would cook it just down to the so it coats the back of your spoon. That's a really good test if you can even on a wooden spoon if you can take and you can draw a line and the line stays but still coats the back of your spoon. That's an excellent way to do that. So I definitely think it's worth trying. And if you try it, you should let me know how it turns out because I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I
Um,
take a lot of those for perfumery because they have a base like the binder for incense very often.
yeah, yeah. So that would be pretty cool. Uh, I'd love to see it. Let's see. And then how long have I found my syrups keep? They don't last very long in my house. My wife doesn't drink it, but I do. Like I'll make myself a bottle just for me. Um, when I took one to an event, okay, the last time I had this at an event, it was my display for Kingdom Arts and Sciences in 2018, and I had three bottles, one flavored with mint, one flavored with strawberries and ginger, and then the Oxmel, which was the honey and vinegar. And I only took one. I ended up taking half a bottle home with me after that day because everyone was tasting, and I had people come back for seconds. So, yeah. Now, one of the things I'm going to mention is that I have been looking into pandemic largesse because that's going to be something that's going to be affect. Largesse is definitely going to be affected because we can't really uh, we can't know if how sanitized everything is and stuff like that. So one of the things that I'm oh wow, up to 2 years, goodness, that's impressive. Um, I still only work in small batch right now because I'm also like experimenting a lot. One of the things that I'm looking into because Sekanjabin makes great largesse. If you store it properly and you wrap it, I've hit 3 months in an 8 in Velt garage. Oof. I'll tell you, an Alberon storage unit ain't much better. Um, um, I am thinking, we have to think ahead. And I noticed that how many of you have access to at least a brewery store or the container store or anything like that? And or you can find like the smaller stoppered bottles, like I mentioned. Um, Pandemic largesse, I'm gonna start making smaller bottles of Sakanjabin because then I can control, the sanitization process. I can control the making sure that it only goes from me to the person who is receiving the largesse. If it passes hands, you use a screw top bottle instead of a stopper bottle, then it's less likely to have been passed from hand to hand, and that's just something to think about. And so that's just something that I'm keeping in mind. Another thing that I would recommend if you're serving to a larger crowd, which again we'll see how things turn out in post pandemic feasts. Um, I've noticed that if you let people know that they can mix it to however they want, the syrup will either go faster or stay the same. So like if you have like your little so for me when I did my display, I had a little card that said, you know, this is my suggestion, but mix it however you like. And people loved that, which I think can be a problem with things pre-mixed drinks like tea or lemonade at feasts. People can't really control how much lemonade mix someone dumps into the container, you know, and then they get annoyed that that's all there is to drink other than, well, water, which water is good for you, obviously, but you're not at a feast to drink water. That's on the field. Um, you can actually serve the Sekanjabin in a metal cup. Um, my Elizabethan persona uses a metal drinking cup that I found at a thrift store that's perfect for the period. The syrup itself, oh yeah, made on date on the bottom of the bottle. That's a great idea. I'm still experimenting with how to make labels, so good to know. Um, it can be served in a metallic cup. It's only during the cooking that I don't recommend reactive metals. Now, stainless steel isn't necessarily a reactive metal, but it does can leave a taste. The same with any silverware. Now, in my experience, I haven't tried copper yet, but I also know that sometimes, um, depending on the quality of your pan, I know some saucier people have had experiences with copper pans that haven't turned out so great. Um, and like you use copper pots and things for making candy, right? But here you're just heating up the liquid enough to dissolve the sugar. You're not actually cooking it to a soft boil or a hard crack stage. So I would still not recommend using copper at this point. I'll probably do a little more experimentation on my own just to see what I come up with. But also, copper cookware is expensive. And I literally use the last time I made the syrup, the pot was like about that big around, and it's non-stick, and it didn't mess with any of the flavor, and it certainly made cleanup a little bit easier later, which is nice. Um, but that's what I got. Are there any other questions? Because it's fine with me if there isn't. Small batch. What do I consider small? Uh, about a size of the screw top bottle. About a size of one of the stopper bottles. So let's see. This one is 25.4 fluid ounces, 750 milliliters. I guess it's close to. Hmm. And then on here it says 12 fluid ounces for serving size. So for me, a small batch would be one of these. Um, and I would recommend that if you're going to make batches, keep it small for now, because one of these and a gallon of water, you're set. Um, Now, the thought that has crossed my mind is the camp. We all know them, the orange igloo or yellow containers, right? For that, that's what I would consider a large batch. And you'd have to play with ratios and the like. And that's where I would consider making a gallon of the syrup to add to that, because then it allows better dispersal of the flavor. And one of the things that I wanted to talk, like the reason I'm so passionate about this is because there's flavors that can really set the mood and give you that medieval moment that you're looking for. You know, yeah, I could drink Gatorade at Estrella. I usually drink the Gatorade that the fighters have because I tend to overheat, but I'm out there water bearing or running around attending usually, or like that. But then when I go to like the Queen's Tea, which is like one of my favorite ones, it's so lovely. Um, I want to drink something that I don't have to walk across to the battlefield to find. And being able to just be like, oh, look, Sekanjabin. Like, I'll walk over with my mug and I'll just do this and I'll do that. It's great. for crown tournaments. Oh, that's a great idea. A regular, yeah. Um, and then when you're doing like a quote unquote regular Sekanjabin, then you could still change it up by using a different kind of vinegar, you know. Um, and I really like the idea of honey and apple cider vinegar and lemon. To me, that tastes like a hot toddy. So like, if you are of the persuasion of drinking, which I am not anymore, um, put a shot of whiskey in it and you have a cure for a sore throat. you know and that's the other reason I'm really passionate about non-period non-alcoholic drinks, is because a lot of us don't drink anymore for personal reasons or for health or sobriety reasons, or and being able to have those options available, not even at feasts, but encourage like tavern owners and people who host salons and tea parties, and even if you just have a bottle of it in camp for someone who doesn't drink, you know uh I think it's important. um Goodness, I'm just trying to think about a gallon of Sekanjabin syrup, because I haven't tried it yet, because most of the time I have smaller kitchen equipment. So um oh, hold on. Hush. My dogs, they have to bark at everything. um so when we were talking about batch quantities, um Mistress Magdalene, right? Am I correct? Yes. Okay. We have met before. It's been a while. Hello. um, yeah, when you're talking about quantities, Mistress Magdalene, um, Sekanjabin is really easy for the home cook, because you can, like, and I'm not going to say your name correctly, Janan. Like Janan does, they make it in a gallon size. Maybe they have a larger kitchen than I do, but I've I've made it in a trailer. I've made it over a camp stove. I've done it, so like for me, the flexibility of the batch size is also what makes it really appealing, because and it's also a really great introduction to medieval cooking, if you think about it. You can't really mess this up. And the only way you could mess it up is if you over if and even like I mentioned, even if it overcooks a little bit or boils over, it's not the worst. So yeah, I noticed that it is 4:48. So are there any other questions or anything before I let you guys go? Because like I said, that's what I got. I'm gonna put my email in the chat, so if anyone has any ideas or questions, they can also send me an email. And oh, thank you, Mistress. Thank you. I am also going to include my blog, where I listed my okay, brain, hold on, where I did my I list my documentation for when I did Sekanjabin the last time, and that was at Outlands Kingdom ANS, and I go through a really detailed how to do it, how to cook, how to, some troubleshooting. So I'll put a link up on my blog for that. So give me one moment. Okay. And if anyone ever has, like, I'm planning to turn this into also a straight up period non-alcoholic drink class. So if anyone has any other ideas or wants to contribute, or, would like me to come and teach it for somebody, please let me know. I'm only in school this summer. I'm not working. So, oh, okay. I guess I did have a handout. All right. That's all from me. So thank you guys. Thank you all very much for attending. I appreciate it.